Hello. So this is the second think tank, and this one is going to be about how AI is used in the interview process. We're going to be talking about the use of facial recognition in interviews. Now, this is important because people are using facial recognition with consent or without consent to basically, record your facial expressions, and it comes up with some kind of metric, hiring metric. So we have a great panel today. My name is Karthik Swamy. I'm a senior data scientist, electrical engineer, and also AI researcher.
I'm Jason Miller. I am a data scientist and a small business owner and technology director.
I'm Matt Bauer. I'm a philosopher at Texas State University.
I'm Joseph Megyeri, retired transportation specialist.
Great. And, I think what's great about this panel is that we have a wide variety of people that can bring, different perspectives to what we're talking about here. So overview of foundational ideas. One, I have two slides here. I'll go over this really quickly. So AI is being used during the interview process. So like we talked about, so this service is currently offered as a software, service, right, and a platform. So this is something like you basically like a subscription based software. And this technology uses what's called computer vision. So computer vision, anytime you deal with images or video and you're trying to alter things like, for example, driverless cars and things like that, that detects the streets, people moving, they use this technology called computer vision, which is part of AI, right? It deals with images. So what's happening is a video is recorded with or without your consent. Now, I actually had an interview one time where they recorded the video, and I'm sure they're probably running something like this in the background. So that's something we'll be talking about. So the whole thing about this is that what the employer is trying to do is use, for example, as I'm talking, it will record like, okay, what kind of pleasant demeanor does this candidate have? Is he smiling? Is he not smiling? So there's obviously danger associated with this. So it will take your interview and it will produce a final report, and it'll have metrics and a timeline, which includes things like facial expressions. Did he smile? Did he frown? Timeline of when this happened. So for example, if somebody asks you, why do you want to work here? And you're not completely excited and you're kind of like this, and AI might detect that maybe he's not too thrilled about the, joining this company. So, and then of course it tries to count how many times you're happy versus maybe you're not thrilled. And, sometimes they can look at fake smile versus real smile. So maybe if you partially smile, it might think that you're not really smiling. And then it generates metrics like, is this person trustable? Is this person likable? Is this person honest or dishonest? Maybe how outgoing, what kind of people skills this person might have. Surprisingly, we generate a lot of micro expressions, right? And then that is picked up by human beings. So AI is basically trying to, it's trained on these facial expressions, which we'll get to on the next slide, maybe even a personality type and emotional index. So a final hireability score will be generated. So this score might be something like, this person is like 85%, hireable. So like I said, this technology is already out there. You can just subscribe to it and then, have them analyze your candidate video. And so the second slide here, we're going to talk about the training data. So obviously AI works with training data, so it can't just do this stuff on its own. So what's happening is that, tons of data are fed into the AI. Like, for example, this is what a smile looks like. This is what a frown looks like. And then it looks at your, are the eyes moving, or maybe it's looking at your pupils, or maybe it's looking at how wide you, like this distance and things like that. Just like, any other kind of, recognition technology. So there's variations of expressions within a category. So this is where we kind of get into trouble a little bit, because we don't know what the training data is. We don't know how accurate it was trained, and so a real smile might be what's called a true positive, right? And a partial fake smile might be a false positive. So this is not good if you don't smile a lot. Somebody like me, sometimes I just kind of partially smile and go, but I'm still happy, right? So AI might not pick that up and might say, okay, wait, he's not really smiling. So, you might have smiled, but it's not equipped enough to pick it up because whatever it was trained on, right? That's what, that's what it's going to pick up on. So a real frown may be a true negative. So like I said, we send these kind of these micro signals that people can pick up on, but people pick up on maybe one or two of these things. AI can kind of automate that, right? And then go, oh, right there, you smiled. Oh, right there, sounds like he's not that happy, so an unintended frown false negative. So this is when maybe if like you purse your lips, or something like that, and if my AI might think that, wait, maybe he's not happy right there. So we're saying that hopefully it's a false negative, right? It doesn't take it as a negative, right? If you just sort of, look like you're not interested or, something like that. So an overall score will be a reflection of how honest was this candidate? How pleasant was this candidate? How likable is this candidate? So this technology thinks it can do that based on facial expressions. So, and like I said, it counts the smiles, it counts this and says, oh, that question was asked and he smiled, so he must like that. So it makes inferences like that. So dangers of this type of AI screening, if you don't smile enough, AI might think that you're not likable, or it might think that you're not outgoing. And what do you do with candidates with similar scores? Now, ideally, maybe, someone's going to think, oh, wait, someone's going to score a 35 and another person's going to score a, 85. And okay, we're going to go with the person that's 85. But a lot of times, it may be like 85 versus 88, right? What do you do when the score is like that? Right. So, so this AI hireability score can be used to supplement the manager's own judgment, or maybe it could be a final deciding factor. So these are things we're going to talk about today. And I think that it would be not good if it was a final deciding factor. Because then it's like, AI sort of, we go back to this. We're going to be talking about this a lot in these tank series, is that it does this sort of take away the humanness, right? Does it sort of replace the, the human factor? Well, if a manager can't even decide if he wants that candidate, then it's like, do you really need to depend on AI? So that's one of the things we'll be talking about here. So let's move on to the questions. Okay, so one of the key questions we have here is, does this violate basic human rights and ethics? So in this, we can ask questions like, is this even legal? Do employers have to disclose you're being recorded? Will this ruin the trust of the employer and employee relationship? How can a prospective hire even be sure that this technology works properly or is trained on the right data? Is there a potential for a lawsuit if AI is a deciding factor? So I think my response here would be that it is probably legal. I don't know, because they may not ask consent from you. So this is the thing, is that if they're just recording your video, they might be using this technology in the background. So I think the employer should disclose if you're being, at least being recorded or this technology being used. And I feel that it does ruin the trust of the employee versus, employer versus employee relationship, because when you want to work for a place, right, there's this trust. You don't want to, if the employer's like, well, did you do that? It's like kind of like clocking in, like being micromanaging, right? This is an aspect of micromanaging to where I feel that if they use this technology, it's probably not, doesn't send the right signal to the candidate. And is there a potential for a lawsuit? I mean, I guess it could be if you can prove that AI was, you made your decision solely on this. So is this ethical? I would say probably not. This shows a sense of distrust from the employer. And then it kind of, paints that corporate picture, like, we don't care about you. And we're just, sort of, all we care about is the bottom line. And then, we want to make absolutely sure it's a human, it's a good fit. So kind of takes the humanness out of it. That would be my response. Jason?
For me, so yeah, and I can't speak to the legal component. I would assume that there's at least the possibility for it to be legal, although maybe there are edge cases where it's not. As for whether or not it's a good idea, I'm also not sure on that. What I definitely would not like as a job seeker would be the situation where every single major employer is using this, so you don't really have a choice. So that would be my main concern. As for it being distrustful, sure. I never really felt that there was a lot of trust in those sorts of situations in the first place, especially if we're talking about a large company interviewing, as we've seen on LinkedIn, hundreds and hundreds of candidates, or maybe not interviewing that many, but considering hundreds and hundreds of candidates for a role. You know, they are only going by what they can verify. They're calling all of the previous employers and following up on references and passing around information between different companies, human resources department. So already not a lot of trust. And as the candidate, you know that this employer might lead you on, waste your time, just keeping you as a backup candidate, something like that. So this is an incremental piece on it. Would make me more uncomfortable, but I don't know if it's a big difference in the level of trust, although I would, you know, ask questions about, could it be bias? Is the person being interviewed going to get a copy of this information? And who's coming up with these algorithms? How are they validated? That would be my initial thoughts.
Okay, great. Matt?
Yeah, so my perspective on this, the two issues that kind of leap out to me the most, of the ones that you prompt us with, are the issue of trust, which I think that it does send a signal of distrust, depending on how transparent the situation is to the interviewee, whether they know that the purpose of the monitoring of their facial features and gestures is to check for the honesty of their emotions. I think if that's already in question in the interview stage, that does send a basic signal of distrust, and which would kind of erode the, as you already described it, Karthik, the personal side of the relationship. I think you guys have touched on that point well already. Maybe what most stands out to me, maybe as a philosopher, is the issue of the question of, is it trained on the right data? If we think about at least one of the kind of central ways that this is being described, what the AI is supposed to be detecting is your likability. And if you just kind of pause and reflect on that moment, likability is a very subjective kind of item. So think about if you're with a friend group and suddenly you meet a new person's introduced to the friend group, you're all likely after the fact to have very different senses of how likable this new person was. And I'm assuming this is because what for me is likable is not going to be the same thing as for someone else in the group. So there's kind of the question of, we have these diagnostic criteria of smiles and frowns, but is there something really that they're tracking that is likability that's generalizes across different people? I have some doubts about this. The last thing that I would mention in this regard is that an interview is a dynamic situation. And on the one hand, there are my reactions and responses, but there's another person in the equation. And there are questions that I'm being fed to respond to. And it might be that my reactions are mirroring the person's reactions that I'm speaking with. And I think this kind of raises the question of how much then will what's being detected on my face reflect me versus the situation I'm in and the person I'm speaking with. And potentially I'll be judged on reflecting the person I'm speaking with rather than on my my own merits. So these are some of the basic concerns that pop up in my mind.
I think that's a great point about the likability and how it's subjective, right? Who's to decide, right? That's really a great point. Joe?
Yeah, this reminds me of the procedures we had at VTA. When I applied for a job there, there was a panel of 3 people that kind of all gave their input to one another to decide in the interview process if you were the qualified material for what they were looking for. If you were likable and you were amiable and you were ready to do the job based on your answers, of course. And of course, any kind of interview like that, you're kind of being scrutinized. not by AI, but you're being scrutinized by the brain cells of three individuals, which amount to the similar kind of thing. But with AI, it brings a whole new angle to it. And like you have to kind of understand what the algorithm is looking for in the case of this process. AI can only do what we program it to do. So if it's looking for people that are going to be pleasant in the workspace, or if they're going to be cooperative, or if they're lying, or whatever, those are all indications that the people who are behind the algorithm have to decide. But I think this falls under the polygraph thing, asking if it's legal or not. Just like polygraphs, they have to ask you before they can do a polygraph on you. And AI may be falling into the same category. They might say, listen, we're going to do an AI on you in this interview. And are you good with that? Are you going to allow that? And if you say yes or no, then it's up to you. It's up to the person. They could stand up and leave and say, no, I refuse the AI interview. I'd rather just have three individuals or one individual or whatever look at me. I don't want to go through the AI process. So I think it may fall under that eventually and become a legal matter where you have to disclose it to the person in the interview. Sorry about the train.
Okay.
The train going by.
Okay, so just to cap this question off, I think Joe brings up a great point here, is that ultimately it's like the training data, right? So it's really, I'm assuming that this technology allows a backend, panel where you can say, I want like this type of candidate. I want somebody that's like, maybe if it's a marketing position, they want someone that's like really likable and outgoing, and they're hoping that AI will sort of pick up these things. So it's probably customizable in the end to where they think that, there's a certain threshold, right, that you have to meet and things like that, where, the employer can, and that's also poses a danger, like you guys pointed out. The second thing I would say that we all touched on, I think, is that this is kind of unsupervised. AI is in the category to where it's like Wild West, right? So a lot of these, do we need to ask permission and things like this hasn't really been worked out yet. So it's true to where, if it's a polygraph test, this is very similar to that. You have to have consent. Here, you don't know if they're doing it or not. And these laws need to be sort of ironed out, in the long run, to where it's like, they really need to ask for consent. And the way this works, I should have clarified this, is that there is a human on the other end. It's just the recording it would be like, if I took, one of the recordings from one of you guys and then ran it through AI. So the interview is normal. There could be three people, on the other end and, doing everything, but it's just that they're analyzing your video. So anyway, that's the thing. Let's move on. Okay. So would candidates participate in such an AI interview? I think this is an important thing. And, when you guys respond, you can talk about your own, like, would you participate in this? So if candidates knew ahead of time that AI will be counting their smiles and evaluating when they were genuine or fake, and providing a timeline of reactions as the questions are being asked, would they still go through this interview process? And I'm going to say, remember that they're expected to pass the AI portion to get the job. So the way that this will work is that you'll have your manager's response, and then you have the AI portion. So there's a potential here where someone could say, oh, wait, he didn't do as well in the AI portion, right? So that's the thing, to where you almost have to pass this, AI kind of, I want to say, this sort of metric data of, like your personality test or something like that, to get the job. So I think that if candidates knew ahead of time, it would really depend on the situation. Like if somebody is desperate for a job, like if I'm desperate to get a job, right, I'll go through this because I'm in the situation where, I'm desperate for it. But if I already have a job and I'm just kind of, looking casually, I wouldn't want to be put through this. So it really depends on, the job seekers, need. So I think that people will jump through the hoops if they have to, because that's the way human beings are trained, is that, if somebody doesn't have a job, they'll kind of go through this. So Yeah, I mean, hopefully it won't get to a point where, like I said, that you need to pass this with a high score to get the job. But that's the question here. Would you participate in this, or do you think people will participate in this, given the option, Jason?
It's a great question, and as for whether I personally would participate, I guess it would depend on the job and the factors that you mentioned. So actually, I think you hit the nail right on the head, that the competitive pressures, especially for people who are seeking employment but don't have income currently, are sufficient to make it where people will participate in it, even if they don't really want to, which might open another can of worms. On the other hand, it might serve the purpose of giving advantages to people who really need the job. You could also say, though, that it might make more sense in certain types of jobs, like ones where you'll be doing sales or presenting on screen, that sort of thing, and less sense for others. And so I guess folks who are seeking positions where they're going to be presenters or speakers or actresses or actors or things like that might find it more understandable, and it might be a more fair way of doing the same thing that human beings were always doing, because at least the AI is being consistent across the candidates. Although, to Dr. Bauer's point, if the input there is different from the interviewer side, that could cause a bias. So in that situation, I might agree to it, but only if I'm being interviewed by an AI or with pre-recorded questions, that sort of thing. So I know that I'll be evaluated fairly across the other candidates.
I would just echo the same points, Karthik and Jason, that you've made, that I would be hesitant. I don't know that in practice it would hold me back from considering a job opportunity. And as Jason was just saying, it will depend on the type of job. I can imagine a scenario where it's appropriate, not a job that I would personally be on the market for, likely. But I can imagine scenarios where it is appropriate to have it. But I think that if I had other options that were likely job prospects, that this would be a count against wanting to pursue a certain job opportunity, other things being equal. And I think one of you mentioned this in response to the previous question about the possibility that you could perhaps opt out of this part of the interview. And I would be concerned, even in that scenario, that sounds like a nice compromise, that you don't have to be subjected to this. But it also raises the potential concern that this would, in a way, count against you as a job candidate, that perhaps you've got something to hide, or that you're not compliant, that you don't play ball. Whether people recognize to themselves that they're evaluating candidates in this way doesn't necessarily matter. In a way, you aren't complying, and like this is a potential concern that it would count against you, I think.
That's a great point. That does non-compliance mean that they don't want you, right? So that's a great point. Joe?
Yeah, no, that's exactly a good point the doctor brings up. And I remember in the transportation business, when we hired union drivers for the metro system, the first thing they tell you on day one in the training session is we're a union operation, and if you want to work here, you got to join the union. And if you don't want to join the union, there's the door, and you can leave right now. And I think that may come up in something like this, where if we're hiring people and we put everybody through AI, you could say, listen, we're going to do an AI on you. We're going to analyze things about your personality. And if you don't like it, there's the door. You don't have to work here. You don't have to go through the process. But if you do, if you accept this process, we look forward to you putting out your best answers to our questions, and hopefully the AI gives you a good report. If not, we'll let you know. So I think it's going to come down to the individual business and what they're looking for, and if they make such demands. Just like if you were going to be if you were going to be somebody working at a bank where you count money for a living, they might say, we put everybody through polygraph to see if you were honest, if you ever stole anything from somebody else. And then we expect you to answer the questions. And if you fail the polygraph, then you're not qualified to count the money that we have in the bank or handle the money in the back room. Let's say they're processing, notes and wrapping up the money or whatever, like they did at VTA. They had a fare box and it was loaded with money each day. And somebody had to work the fare box at the end of the day and count all the money and process it and make sure they didn't steal anything. I'm sure there was probably a polygraph associated there. I'm not sure they did, but they might have. So it comes down to the job, and it comes down to whether the individual would like to go through it. Now, if they don't tell you about it, that's another problem. But I think they should tell you about it if they're going to do it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the things that we're contemplating here, is that will employers be, honest with this stuff? Because AI has this kind of reputation already where it's kind of sneaky, or people are using it and they're not being honest with it because it's not a kind of an upfront technology, even though it's super popular. So anyway, all great answers.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry to hijack it, but just to ask a follow-up question, because I agree with that point that definitely they should disclose it. I think currently the state of affairs, at least on LinkedIn, is that if there's going to be AI assessment of your application, you have to approve that and authorize it. But to Joe and Matt's point, if you decline, that can count against you potentially. So since we're all kind of agreed that that is the wrong way of doing things, to sneak it in on somebody, and we're all kind of taking a similar set of opinions, I thought it'd be interesting just to take the opposite perspective and say, okay, if I'm a small business employer and I'm going to invest a large percent of my overall wealth and my, take a big risk on you with my business, why shouldn't I be able to use this to help me see if you're a good investment? And if I can use this to see if you're a good investment, then what is it you need from me really in order for you to feel that I'm being transparent and honest? Do you need just to know that it's happening, or do I need to give you a copy? Do you need to know the name of the algorithm so you can go see what you think of it beforehand? Or what would be our ask as from the job seeker perspective, what would be the ask to the employer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that if you gave them a report, kind of like a credit report, you know what I mean? It's where it could look ugly, it could look this. So if you would see the timeline and say, hey, look, he smiled right there. So we're going to deduct, we're going to add 5 points, or, doesn't look like he's happy there, we're going to subtract 5. Like, you're opening up a can of worms, right? So this is stuff that, like I said, we can't contemplate this right now. But if people were to have that report, I think, it's sort of like, the more information you share, the more, you got to be able to answer these questions. So employers might not be able to answer the questions because they didn't program the algorithm, right? They're just using a service. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely something to be concerned about. We actually have a related question to that, Jason, towards the end, to where we say, yeah. So we say, to your point about, will this help the employer, right? So yeah, I mean, does anybody else want to answer Jason's question?
I'll hold off on the last question. I do have some thoughts about that.
All right, yeah, we got to move on. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this question here, would candidates then try to outsmart the AI? So if candidates knew technology was being used and their smiles and facial expressions are being counted, graded, and evaluated, wouldn't they go the extra mile to be more friendly, to throw off the AI? Will people then try to game the system because they can easily fool the AI? Now, this is happening in all kind of disciplines where AI is being used, is that, we find, like, for example, with ChatGPT, if we challenge it with a advanced cognitive question, it doesn't know what to do, right? Sometimes, it might not, infer the right thing. It may not know, what we're talking about. Or so this kind of challenge is posed to any AI technology. So I think this is inevitable to where if you tell the candidate, it's kind of like this. I want to share one thing with you to where in one of my jobs, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the system that it's called the DISC system, DISC. So the DISC system, what it does is that this is a company again that makes you go through the survey and a bunch of questions. So when you answer these questions, it kind of rates you and kind of gives you a personality, kind of pigeonholes you into a personality, right? What you can look this up later, but each of these letters stand for something. Like, it's like how dominant is this person? And then they asked us to take your results and put it right outside your cube, which I thought was, kind of weird because they figured that someone coming in needs to know your secret formula, right? So that they can kind of come in and say, oh, wait, this person is more, open-minded. So I'm going to approach this person, kind of in an open way. This person tends to be domineering. So I'm going to change my approach to this person. So this kind of reminds me of that to where my point here is that when people took that DISC exam, right, DISC, DISC exam, people basically gave the answer that, that the company was expecting. Right? They weren't being honest. They basically outsmarted it, right? They basically outsmarted it because they tried to give, I'm sure we've all done this to where it's like we give the answer. We know we want to give an answer, but we know it's not for whatever reason, we want it to come off in a good way. So we know what is being asked. We know the intention of what is being asked. So we change our answer just to make it look good, right? So we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. So human beings are so smart that we know that, oh, wait, I know what you're implying by asking that question. I'm going to give you the response that you want, right? So that's what this is going to be to where if you let them know that, oh, wait, you're being evaluated on your facial expressions, I think human beings will basically try to, fool the AI, just like we tried to fool ChatGPT or any other thing to where in this slide, all these images, by the way, are generated by GenAI. So to where this person is smiling, overly smiling to fool the AI. So I guess in a way you could fool the AI, but just smiling a lot. So the question here is, what if the candidates try to outsmart the AI? If they do, then what will be the point? So just like that DISC thing to where it's like the company spent all this money and they did all this, but then you're not getting an honest response from the people because the people are smarter than the system. They know that you're asking me this to pigeonhole me. And, they're like, well, I'm not dumb enough to say, give you answer A. I know what you want. I'm going to give you answer B. So that's the thing here. So I'll open it up, Jason.
Well, yeah, I would certainly expect that folks will try to study for the test.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure to what extent we can consider it gaming the system. If we know that we're being evaluated on this and it's our job to score well on it, then it makes sense that people might use starting out with something like the presentation trainer software, which they already have and have had for years, software that will use machine learning, computer vision on your video to help you learn to be a better presenter. And I suppose the next iteration of that would be to tailor it specifically to the sort of like higher view or whatever company's software is popular for this use case to try to tailor it towards that. You might take it to the next level and ask, are people interviewing for data science jobs going to start using adversarial data science like Clever Hans and ART libraries to totally throw off or trick the AI during their interview in a more advanced fashion? So some little QR code in the back or something I've set up that will set off the algorithm in a way that's unexpected and just cause it to score me highly is even a possibility. That's it.
Matt?
Yeah, my thoughts here are that I sort of along the lines of what Jason was saying, that I don't know if I would exactly want to call it gaming the system, but being prepared absolutely for the situation and to do as well as you can. And again, for some jobs, it might be appropriate that you're being monitored to show certain expressions, to have a certain kind of personality. But to my mind, like the concern that it raises is about the relevance of what's being detected. And that because people are going to be self-conscious about already going into an interview, you're highly self-conscious about your appearance and how you come off, that for a job where it's not even particularly relevant what you're being assessed for, what I worry about is that it's shifting the focus in the context of the interview away from what's really important and matters. And that this would be bad for hiring. Again, provided that that whatever exactly is being detected through likability isn't particularly relevant for the job. So yeah, yes, people are going to come in ready, trying to perform, to look well. Maybe that's not exactly a gaming system, but it seems like not the sort of thing that needs to be prioritized in a situation where already you're hyper concerned with your appearance.
I think that's a great point.
You know, a lot of people already do these things. Like they read the job description, then they do some research on the job itself, or they'll go, you know, visit the website of the company, find out what they do, and try to adapt themselves to what the needs are of that company. So they'll be prepared. They'll do the background legwork before they go in for the interview. And then if it's an AI interview, so much the better. Now they're prepared. Now they're talking the language that the company wants to hear. They'll be talking about the kinds of things the company is looking for. You know, I mean, it's all in your job description many times. Sometimes the job description is kind of short if it's a small company, but on a big company, the job description is often quite clear as to what they're looking for. And people prepare themselves as it is right now for an interview process. And I think in the future, if they know there's AI there, or there's going to be AI there, I think they'll just prepare even better, and they'll talk the language of the company so that the AI picks up on not only their characteristics, but on their language and the things they said that have to do in relationship to the job. And so it's possible candidates will try not to outsmart it, but to adapt themselves to the interview process to make it, I mean, it's to make themselves more appealing to AI. It's not all about smiles and stuff. It could be just about being sincere, not necessarily being, you know, smiling and giggling or anything, but being sincere and forthright and such things as the company would need in that job opportunity. I mean, if you're looking for somebody to manage the front desk like a secretary, you might want somebody that's kind and considerate. But if you're looking for an engineer, you might want somebody that's serious and knows their business, knows what they're talking about when it comes to engineering. They may not be very smiley. They might not come across very friendly, but they know their business. They know their job.
Okay, so I think we could really talk about this forever, but I think that one of the consensus I think that we can come to here is that for this question, remember that hiring a candidate, right, is really expensive to bring on somebody and bring, you know, so I think today the thing is, especially Jason, as you know, with, you know, the field that we're dealing with, like data science, tech, is that there's so many candidates, right, that employers, they don't want to make the wrong decision and hire the wrong candidate, right? And a cultural fit, right, it's almost more important than the technical stuff. So for like a technical job, I'm talking all jobs, right? But for a technical job, you'll usually have like 4 or 5 people that have passed all the technical questions. They can code, they can do all this. And at the very end, it comes down to likability. So that's my fear here, is that this thing might generate a false positive. That, you know, if somebody, you know, smiles a lot, if somebody, you know, puts on this front of, you know, outgoing personality, but then they're not really that, right? They just did that for the interview. So AI would basically generate a false positive because it doesn't know the difference because it's not smart enough. And then it would basically say, oh, this is the greatest person, to your point, Joe, I agree with you that it's not all about smiles, but it's really, how is this, that's what we don't know. How is this technology, obviously this technology will probably get better, but how is this programmed by the human to say that if you don't smile, right? What else is it going to read your facial expression on? So the way this is trained is that it's trained on hundreds of images of basically like, okay, this is what a smile looks like, right? This is what a resting face looks like, this is what, so it is a can of worms to where it's like, it's a question we can't really answer here, but in the infancy of this technology, they're looking for expressions like outward big expressions, right? I suppose if you go in there with a wooden face, like a poker face, and you just do this through the whole interview, it'll probably say, maybe he's not that excited. So all great answers. So let us move on to the next question. Okay. This is a really good question here. So would this introduce a bias in the hiring process? So the aim of this question is basically the hiring manager has some kind of idea of the person he wants, right? Now he has this other information from AI. So what do you do with it? Is that going to influence his decision? So wouldn't this corrupt the judgment of the hiring manager with an unintended bias, right? Would the manager be compelled to go with the AI decision and not be against it because there's pressure to trust the AI? So I think this idea is very real because we talked about the shiny object syndrome, to where managers kind of run away with the idea that, oh, wait, this is new and they want to be relevant, right? They want to be like, they're using the latest and greatest thing. And most managers, right, want to say yes for anything that HR says, because, HR has so much power in the general sense in any agency that nobody wants to go against HR, right? So my question here is, would HR enforce going with AI as a final hiring decision? Would they trust the technology too soon? I know these are all speculative questions, but I think the power of HR to say, well, what did AI say? Don't go against the AI, right? That's my fear here, is that they may trust this technology too soon. Now, I want to make one reference here, the Star Trek reference. Now, I'm a Star Trek fan, but I like the first Star Trek, and that's it. I like the first one with, James T. Kirk, and that's my favorite one. I've actually never seen any of the other ones. But Jason, I'm sure you've seen this episode. There's an episode called The Ultimate Computer, and they call it the M5. Right, this is one of my favorite episodes. So with Dr. Daystrom, he comes in and then he basically automates the entire starship. And then what they're going through is that they're going through war games, right? So the AI passes with flying color for the first 40 minutes of the show. And then, they actually tell, Jim to basically, they refer to him as basically not wanted and not needed. And then say, oh, wait, this thing can run the whole starship, right? So they trust the technology too soon. And then what happens is that AI can't really discern between what is real and what is basically a war game, and it starts attacking. So it basically destroys the ship, which is unmanned. And then the thing is, if there are people there, this thing would have destroyed it. And the whole plot, I don't want to ruin the plot for you, but the whole thing is then they tried to wrestle the, control back from the AI. So that's the thing with trusting the technology too soon, is that a lot of times what happens is that since you haven't looked at every avenue or looked at where it fails, and they think, oh wait, this is the same thing with ChatGPT. It works 80% of the times. Let's bring it in, right? So they're not. So that's the thing here, is that if they trust this technology too soon, and HR might be like, okay, use this, will there be a bias in the hiring decision? So I think there's definitely a potential, and there's also a pressure, because now it's like the hiring managers own decision. It's not trusted, right? Now you have something else here, AI, and then people are going to be like, well, what was your decision versus what was AI's decision? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Jason.
Yeah, no, you call out the issues well, and yes, that was a great episode of Star Trek, which got kind of recycled in Next Generation and a few different episodes as well. But I'll avoid going into that rabbit hole. So I actually agree with you, but once more, just because I don't want us to be an echo chamber, I'm going to kind of try to take the opposite position, just to make it more interesting. So I would say that as a small business guy, if I were to put on that hat for a second, I think that I could evaluate people more consistently with AI, and I can be more fair, because otherwise I'm going to have biases either way. When I speak to a person on the phone, I'm going to have biases based on their voice, their word choice, the name. Even, is this the same name as somebody I've met before who I liked or who I didn't like? That's going to influence me. So maybe the AI can help me be more consistent. And then if I were to think of this as a job seeker, I would say that what I would want out of it is I would want to see, kind of like you mentioned, a report or some quantitative feedback, something I kind of think job seekers deserve anyway, even without bringing AI into it. And so there could be some transparency of why didn't you get this job? What can you do better? Especially if this is not only going to be used for likability, but the way that people have been abusing the audio AI already for years is with the polygraph type of applications, which are, it's a binary classification, which should be the easiest kind of problem for machine learning, but it's also a use case where it's been notoriously inaccurate for about 100 years. And yeah, so if you're going to use AI that may not be taking into account the context of an interview and a person being made nervous or more on edge from those sorts of contextual factors and personality factors, and then that gets misinterpreted as distrust, as not being truthful or lacking confidence in something that you may actually have a lot of professional confidence behind, then that would be concerning. But if you give that transparency to the job seeker, I think it grants a lot of credibility.
Excellent. So a thought just popped up in my mind, but I do want to come back and kind of follow a similar direction as Jason was just pursuing. One potential bias is perhaps against neuroatypical or neurodivergent people, that their very existence suggests that, and I had sort of mentioned this earlier, that there may not be a single category of how you should expect a person to respond in this situation, and that perhaps the normal or the statistically more likely norm would involve leaving some people out, if provided their neuroatypicality involves emotion expression and how you interact with other people. And yeah, that seems like a live issue here. But kind of pivoting in a very different direction, when you think about these kinds of technologies and their purpose in the interviewing process, if the idea is that we want them to do something that we already do, but to do it better, then it's hard to see in principle how there could be an objection to that. And then what Jason says is very fair, that perhaps the way in which they do it better is that I'm inconsistent. I have moods, maybe I skipped breakfast, and these are all known to affect a person's decision making. But this will never be true of the AI that's been trained up to do what I'm already doing, but to do it better. Then I think the remaining question is, how do we determine whether what the AI is doing is the same thing as I'm doing, but better, or whether it's doing something different? For instance, if it's about reading the honesty of emotions, I have a feeling that it may not be doing the same thing that I'm doing. It may not be picking up on the same signals and processing them in the same way that I am. And I predict the sort of difficulty that we would run into engaging whether the AI is doing the same thing that I would be doing normally or something different, is that increasingly AI is opaque. It's a black box. We don't know exactly how it gets from its inputs to its outputs. So if the algorithm is transparent, then we'll be able to resolve this issue. If it's not, then yeah, then perhaps we don't know whether it's just doing what we would already be doing, and then there's no concerns, or whether it's shifted it to something different and potentially problematic.
Joe.
You know, you see this bias, you see a bias in hiring all the time. If you go to different places of business, I get around here and there and I see different places. I do see occasionally kind of a hiring bias where a company's looking for a particular type of person and they end up hiring clones of one another. Basically, they're looking for the same kind of person to do this job. So they have a whole staff that almost resembles one another, or at least they have something in common with one another. And I think when AI is perfectly in place, and it will be the wave of the future, it may also have a hiring bias. In fact, my pet peeve is that it may actually be looking for reasons not to hire you. I tell people HR is not your friend when they want a big job. HR is really there to find out how they can get rid of you. Let's say they have a job opening for 5 or 10 people in a corporation, and 400 people apply because it's a popular place and they all want that salary. Well, HR's tasked with the job of eliminating hundreds of people. They're really there to eliminate people. So AI is going to be used for the same reason as they do now. They're going to find ways to get rid of you. So they're going to program it in there that any little thing that doesn't fit their biases is going to force them to say, well, this doesn't fit, he's out or she's out. That way they can eliminate the 300 or 400 extra people who applied for this job and just focus on the ones they really want, or the ones that really fit the bill. So HR, as it is today, is not really your friend. You think you're going in there saying, oh, you know, slap on the back, we'd love to have you, this is a wonderful place to work, but they're really not there to hire you. They're there to get rid of you initially, and then only sort out the ones they really want to hire, and those will be passed on to HR management, perhaps, and then they'll sort it out at that level, at the higher level of HR. But the basic HR is there to get rid of a lot of people when they come in. So there's going to be a bias written into these AI algorithms, for sure.
Okay, Joe, again, you brought up this great point. Everybody's brought up a great point, but I just want to talk about what this point that Joe brought up, which is basically the concern of all AI right now, is that the bias that, however it's programmed with, right, in the training data. So that is a very valid question, is that where's the training data coming from? So for something like ChatGPT, or, you know, this is one of the biggest concerns, I'm sure Jason would agree, is that it has the same biases as humans, right? And you program it unintentionally through the training data with the biases that humans have. So AI is actually not impartial, it's actually biased. Great point, Joe. So that's actually like the crux of this whole thing, to where it's like all these AI technologies, what we're running into is that, oh, wait, this human bias is kind of seeping in there. And then through the training data, or through the, you know, the programming as well. And then Matt, you brought up a great point about this is not for everybody. Like, what would happen if it was, you know, somebody that's neurodivergent, that somebody to where they, you know, this facial technology won't work for them, right? That is a great point. So that would strengthen the idea that, oh, wait, you know, I need to opt out, right? Because I don't think this facial recognition technology will do a good enough job, right? And, you know, honestly, I think even most people would probably opt out, I would think, right? Not just people that maybe, you know, aren't expressive enough, or maybe, you know, or, you know, they have some kind of, you know, health issue where, you know, they cannot be that expressive, right? Not just those people, but a lot of people, I think. Because what if you just don't feel like being that expressive on the day of the interview, right? I think everybody's brought up really excellent points, but you know, I never thought about that till Joe mentioned it. It was like, oh wait, that is the biggest thing here, is that, you know, with the bias, right? There's that inherent bias that, you know, I mean, it's a notion that's everywhere, but that's not what I was thinking when I was writing this question. But now that Joe brings it up, it's like, makes perfect sense. So this is a great discussion. Yep, inherent bias is one of the biggest things that we got to deal with. Okay, now, Jason, you touched on this question and you've sort of answered this question in many ways, but so question here is that anytime you have some kind of argumentative, you know, panel like this, right, we have to basically look at both sides, right? What I don't want to do is we don't want to come in here and say this is bad, here are the reasons A, B, C. We have to really look at both sides. So that is the sign of a good panel. So this question asks, could AI actually help make a better hiring decision? So so even though the idea of using AI to make a character judgment during an interview process may not be ethically sound, could AI actually help managers who can't decide make a better decision with this particular technology? Now, we're not talking about resume scanning or anything like that, right? We're talking about just the facial recognition. The reason I think that there might be something to this is that sometimes, you know, a strength of a manager, you hope, is the ability to lead, right? Their ability to make, you know, decisions, their ability to lead, their having that vision to basically move the organization forward. They may not be good at hiring people. I've known a lot of managers like this to where it's like, you know, they can't really make, you know, even though they may be a people person, right? They may not really be good at, like, you know, assessing people and hiring people. So I think some managers might actually, you know, benefit from this, or having an extra guide that kind of, you know, echoes what they say, or maybe, you know, disagrees with what they say, or kind of challenges their opinion. So I think for the most part, you know, if you're a really good manager with really good hiring skills, you know, you may not want to use this, but I think a portion of the managers, this could actually be helpful to them to make a decision. So, so I think it could be helpful for some managers. We don't know which, you know, who it's going to be, but some portion of the people who are, you know, they want to hire staff, right? Somebody could actually benefit from this. So, Jason.
Yeah, perhaps, for sure, especially if it's a job where the person being interviewed would be in a role where they're going to be very customer facing or student facing, or some sort of presenter type of role. This could give an edge. For the other sorts of jobs, I feel like even just having the on camera part of the interview is more of a distraction and probably makes things more subjective and opaque and prone to bias. If we're talking about, let's say, a programmer position or engineer position, then I don't think it would be as useful. But yeah, potentially, sure, this could help.
Yeah, I just, maybe to kind of condense what Karthik and Jason, you've already said, if we have a clear idea of what it is the AI is targeting, if we know it's relevant to the position, and if it turns out that the hiring person would be less reliable and less consistent than the AI, it's hard to see what would be the drawback. Those are perhaps significant ifs, though, and all of that would need to get ironed out. I notice here in thinking through this question, the reference to character judgment I find really interesting, in that when you talk about character, you mean a quality of a person that they demonstrate consistently in a variety of different situations. And I suppose what's interesting, and maybe this isn't unique to AI assessments, but it would affect any assessment of a candidate, is that how you perform in the context of an interview is probably really uncharacteristic and not exactly representative of how you are typically in most of the time. But all that aside, I would be very suspicious of the idea that that an AI would be able to pick up somebody's character from one encounter and one meeting. in this sort of situation. I suppose the same thing applies to a person making the same judgment.
All good, very good points. I agree with that wholeheartedly. AI will, I'm sure, be used in the future, and it'll be a way of giving you more information. Let's say you have lots of applicants, and if AI is properly programmed to look at each one with the same kind of structure, the biases or whatever, and it's just going to be another tool in the arsenal of how to pick the employee. I hate to think that we depend on AI solely for that decision-making process. I would like to see it as a tool used to help HR sort out the better people, the wheat from the chaff, or whatever you want to say, so that it could be used as a tool. And I'm not sure you can make a lot of judgment out of it, because it's one day, 1 hour, one interview, and what can you learn? But it'll give you a biased view, maybe a non-biased view of what you're looking for in an applicant, and it should be used as a tool. But I don't think it should be used solely for decision making.
Great. So, Matt, again, you had a great point there with talking about how the interview, and I fully agree with that, as Joe did as well, is that the interview is not a representation of how you perform in the job, because that's a high stress situation where you're kind of going in and giving it all you got, right? You're giving like 200%, and all your brain cells are working in overdrive, and most people can't deliver that type of intensity on their day-to-day job. I don't think so, because whenever I have an interview, you guys can chime in if you want, but whenever I have an interview, even if it's an hour, right? Even if it's at 11 o'clock in the morning, I'm done for the day afterwards, because it is so intense that you're putting so much brain power into it, so much thinking power into it. You put everything you have into it, and it's like you're putting 200%. And then after that, it's like you don't want to do anything. I usually take the day off, right, when I have a big interview like that. So I don't think that level of intensity can be expected from day-to-day jobs. So day-to-day work, that is a great point. And then with Joe, absolutely, is that this technology should be used in conjunction, and not that's the fear, is that what if we rely on HR relies on this, right? Oh wait, the human being can't really discern if he's lying or not. We kind of don't want to make a wrong hiring decision. Like I said, it's really costly. That's one of the biggest problems that companies are facing, is that they hire somebody, looks great on paper, did great on the interview, panel, everybody liked him. You bring him in, and then 3-4 months later, for whatever reason, he's not fitting in, and then they have to, get rid of him and then hire a new person. So this is really costly. That's why I'm afraid of this technology might get more incorporated, is because the biggest fear is that, oh, we don't want to hire the wrong candidate. So if they think AI could help, I think this could take off. So anyway, great points, everybody. And I believe this is the last question. So this is more of just your opinion question. So would you use this technology, this AI technology, to hire staff if you had the option? So given the option of using AI facial recognition technology to generate a character likability or hireability score, would you use the software service to hire staff? Why or why not? I probably would not, but I mean, if I trust my judgment and I value my judgment, and I think that I want to make myself better. So my whole thing would be, I want to get better at hiring people. I want to get better at reading people. So that can't be achieved if I, use AI, but I would use it as a technology enthusiast, just as like a joke, just to see, okay, let's just see how my curiosity, I'm sure, much as Jason, is that, but what does this thing spit out? Let's just have a look at it. So I would probably just use it as just a curiosity of the technology, to see, to keep myself informed, as is this good enough, or so that, I could just be more informed, maybe, inform other people, but I would not rely solely on this. But I would give it a shot just to see if it's working, just to see if it's like, just the engineer in me, just to kind of see like, oh, what is this thing? Let's see what it says, and then did it sort of, align with what I said. But I value my own, character judgment skills, and I would not want that to go to waste because, then, become sort of, overly reliant on this kind of, oh, wait, it already kind of gives you the answer. And I don't want to, echo what AI does, right? So in that sense, I wouldn't use it, but I would use it just for the curiosity, just to see, oh, okay, let's just see what it does. Let's see what, where it fails, or, just to understand the technology better. Jason?
For me, it would be pretty limited scope where I might consider it. For the most part, I think I would use AI, but I would use other types. I would use the resume-based AI and those sorts of more traditional algorithms with fuller data sets, so to speak. But I might use the computer vision if it were for a presenter type of role. So I guess if I were hiring somebody who is a figurehead or perhaps a salesperson for some high price tag item, then I would consider it.
Matt?
Similar in tone with you both. I'm very doubtful that I would want to use this technology, and I really appreciate what you said, Karthik, that it kind of taps into a larger concern about reliance on AI and more advanced forms of technology more generally, that it kind of can potentially result in de-skilling, that there are things that maybe we don't want to offload on an AI because it's important that we have those skills. And we lose out on them if we outsource too much of that. And this seems, perhaps there's some context where that wouldn't matter, but this seems like one that is significant. If you're the HR person, it should matter that you're on your game, and that the stakes are that it depends on you in particular. What the judgment call is in the situation. I think that in principle, I can imagine a fair and appropriate use of this kind of technology. But to come back to what Joseph had said before, that the judgment of personality in the interview circumstance should be balanced against other things that speak to the candidate's qualities over the long haul and their demonstrated record. And that not only should it be balanced by those things, but those things should matter much, much more. And that given the relative importance of the long-standing track record versus what happens in this little interview, that the significance of the interview just wouldn't warrant the use of this extra measure and the extra technology, that it might be inappropriate for that reason.
So as a former businessman where I had a small company and had to hire drivers for my fleet of buses years ago, I always tried to make the personal call myself. This technology wasn't available. Had it been available, I don't know if I would use it at that time or even at this time, because there's so much information that I can get from just talking to an applicant myself and making a judgment call myself. So AI for me would not have worked in my particular business or company, but it might be used in a major corporation for a high-end job or something like that. I can see it used there. But if I was just running a small company, which I did, I'd prefer probably just to make the decisions myself. I wouldn't use it.
Great. I think that everybody's answer was great. I mean, the thing is that, we don't want to rely on something and give up our own mental faculty. And I think that is the theme that we're going to be revisiting a lot, is that, AI can be helpful, but then you don't want to, give up your own sort of, mental brain cells and then have them be dormant. So concluding thoughts, I'll start this off. So this has been a great discussion. I want to thank everybody for showing up. I would say with this technology, ultimately it's still maturing, right? It's still, a lot of people aren't using it yet. It may catch on, it may not catch on, but I believe consent is one of the biggest things here to where companies really need to ask and then say, okay, we're going to be looking at your facial expressions. Is that okay with you? Right. So they need to ask that. Right now, I think that's kind of, falling through the cracks, because if they're recording the interview, you don't know what they can do with it. So I had an interview where they recorded me, and then I'm sure they ran the software in the back end. So I think that is a red flag where if they say, oh, we're going to be recording this, because then they can do whatever they want afterwards. So I believe consent is very important here, because and that is the other thing. Will that introduce a bias? Because if I tell you that, oh wait, you're being recorded, and then we're going to be analyzing your facial expressions, then that person might not be honest, right? Then the person might be, okay, wait, they're conscious of it. So that's the thing. So that is a Pandora's box here. And then I would say second, the inherent bias that we all talked about here with all AI technology, whether it be ChatGPT, chatbots, and all these different things, to where the bias kind of creeps in from the training data, right? And it's kind of, especially if you use, human generated data to train AI, then, well, it's going to have those same biases as the humans. So that is, I think the ultimate goal is one of the motivations for using AI, that it's impartial, right? That we don't want it to be biased, because then it's like, as Joe was saying, everybody's sort of biased, right? We all have our likings, and the hiring process is biased. So that's the thing. It's where it's like, we have to basically try to unbias it as much as possible, but there's only so much we can do, because training data by itself has a inherent bias in it, which is going to be more, I prefer this over that for, different reasons. And I would say my third point would just be, I can see how this technology could catch on, because, we don't know obviously how, what are the intentions of corporate, because one of the most challenging things is hiring the right candidate. Getting somebody in there that's wrong and then getting somebody else is really costly. That's one of the biggest things. So I can see how people might adopt this technology, but they need to be very ethical about it and get the proper consent, and also make sure they understand it, and then program it in the back end properly, right? Because they are going to have the screen where it says, okay, what are you looking for? Are you looking for an outgoing person, or were you looking for this or that? And so it would be interesting to see how this pans out. Are people going to jump on this? Are people going to, but there are already software services out there that do this for a fee. So they'll just analyze your video. But anyway, that's my thought, is that I think people would be apprehensive to kind of, participate as I would, I think, because, I don't want my facial, expressions analyzed and saying that it may not be fair. That would be my biggest concern, is that it's not fair, right? I want to make sure the AI is going to make a good decision and not be biased. And then, say that, oh, wait, you smiled right there. Oh, you didn't smile right there. That must mean that, you're lying, or things like that. Anyway, so I would just say proceed with caution with this technology. Don't jump on it as if it's 100% accurate, and then learn more about it before using it. That would be my advice to businesses. Jason?
Yeah, it's definitely a risky but potentially beneficial technology for employers. When we're talking about job interviews and HR and that sort of thing, we're talking about a situation with a very unequal distribution of power, and it's been that way for a very long time. Businesses are organizations, whereas job seekers are individuals. The group there, the business, is able to coordinate within its company and across companies, and it's a economic and financial center. So it holds this relatively giant share of the power. So I would hope to see moving forward AI that's benefiting the job seeker, that helps to empower them. Perhaps they have an AI on their side, watching their interviews, giving them suggestions, and evaluating the company and data on different companies and different jobs to help them find the best fitting positions, as well as being used in this way to potentially benefit employees.
I have to say on the whole that I think I have a negative judgment about this one, that it seems to me that it would probably not be a good technology to implement widely, that even if you're thinking about it in terms of making a safe and secure investment in hiring a person, that fine-grained readings of their exact emotional responses in that interview scenario, that's not a super reliable guide to what you're getting compared to all the other information of people who can speak to their character and references and their job track record and their education and what achievements that they can point to that they've done, that these things matter. And that I admit in reality, probably too much, even factoring the AI out of the equation, too much is probably placed on how do I like this person in the interview scenario. But that makes me think that that's not the place where we need to be investing more and putting more emphasis. And so yeah, I would be reluctant and likely think that this is not the best avenue to pursue in fine-tuning our hiring practices.
I would like to see if AI was used for this type of use to hire people and to analyze facial expressions and all that, and how they came across. If it were to be used, I'd like to see a copy of the results given to the applicant at the end, somehow a readout or something, that if they didn't get the job per se, they would at least have information about why they didn't qualify, and they could better themselves for the next interview. Because if this becomes widespread among corporate use, you never know really why you weren't hired. You go in the old days, you left the resume, they never called you back. Or if you had an interview, they might have said, you're not the kind of person we're looking for. They never really gave you detailed information. AI could actually help the employee find a job or prepare themselves better for interviews. So if there was a printout or a readout or some kind of interaction that they could give to the person, since they might have asked them, could we use AI? And if you consented to use AI, you might be able to get a printout or readout why you didn't get the job, or maybe even why you were qualified for the job. Both ways. So I'd like to see something like that maybe in the future.
Hey guys, great panel, great discussion. I want to thank you all for coming.
All right.
Thank you.
Great talking with you all. Thanks, Karthik.
Well,
See you guys.
Bye.